In 1925, a man walked into the fanciest hotel in Paris and sold the Eiffel Tower. He didn't own it. He had no connection to the government. He had never had any right to sell so much as a single bolt of it. And yet he walked away with a suitcase full of cash, and the man he sold it to was too ashamed to even report the crime. Then, and this is the part that makes him a legend, he came back a month later and sold it again. This is the story of Victor Lustig, the smoothest con man who ever lived. And by the end, you'll understand something uncomfortable about why cons like his actually work, and why the smartest people are often the easiest to fool. Let's start with the man himself. Lustig was born around 1890 in a small town in what's now the Czech Republic. He was brilliant. He spoke 5 languages fluently. He was charming, elegant, and utterly without conscience. By his 30s, he was wanted by dozens of police forces across 2 continents, operated under around 45 aliases, and called himself Count Lustig, a title as fake as everything else about him. He cut his teeth running scams on luxury ocean liners crossing the Atlantic, fleecing wealthy passengers who had nothing but time and money. But Lustig didn't want to be a petty crook. He wanted the perfect con. And in the spring of 1925, sitting in a Paris hotel room, he found it in a newspaper. The article was about the Eiffel Tower. Today, it's the symbol of Paris. But in 1925, it was 36 years old, rusting, and wildly expensive to maintain. It had been built as a temporary exhibit for the 1889 World's Fair and was never meant to last. The paper reported that the city was struggling to afford its upkeep and openly wondered whether it might be cheaper to just tear it down. Most people read that and felt a little sad. Lustig read it and saw the opportunity of a lifetime. Here was the genius of it. The con would work because the story was plausible. Everyone had read the same articles. Everyone knew the tower was a money pit. So if a government official quietly announced the city had decided to scrap it, well, that wasn't hard to believe at all. Lustig wasn't going to sell a lie. He was going to sell a rumor people already half believed. He hired a forger to produce official government stationery. He gave himself a title, Deputy Director General of the Ministry of Posts and Telegraphs. And he sent confidential letters to 5 of the biggest scrap metal dealers in Paris, inviting them to a discreet meeting at the Hôtel de Crillon, one of the most prestigious hotels in the city. The location alone did half the work. Con men know that the setting sells the story. At the meeting, Lustig was masterful. He explained, in strict confidence, that the government had decided to demolish the Eiffel Tower and sell it for scrap. 7,000 tons of iron. He swore them to secrecy, telling them the public would be outraged if it got out, which conveniently explained why there was no official announcement. Then he loaded them into chauffeured cars and gave them a private tour of the tower, breezing past the queues with a forged official pass. It was all theater, and it was working. Now, Lustig didn't want the highest bidder. He wanted the right bidder, and he found him in a man named André Poisson, a businessman who was newer to Paris, a little insecure, desperate to break into the city's elite and prove he belonged. Lustig could smell it. Poisson's ambition was the lever. But Poisson had doubts. It was all moving fast, and it was all so secretive. So Lustig did something audacious. He arranged a private meeting, leaned in, and confessed. He was just a poorly paid government official. He hinted that, for the deal to go Poisson's way, he'd need a little something extra, a bribe, and that the request for a bribe is what erased every doubt Poisson had. Because in Poisson's mind, a con man wouldn't ask for a bribe. Only a real, corrupt official would. The fraud made Lustig seem more legitimate, not less. Poisson wasn't just convinced. He felt like an insider now, in on a corrupt little secret. So Poisson paid. The full price of the tower plus the bribe on top. Around 70,000 francs. And within the hour, Victor Lustig was on a train to Austria with a suitcase of cash. He sat in Vienna and waited for the newspapers to explode. They never did, because when André Poisson realized what had happened, he was so humiliated, so terrified of being known as the fool who bought the Eiffel Tower, that he never told the police. He never told anyone, which gave Lustig an idea so bold it's almost unbelievable. If the first victim was too embarrassed to talk, The con was still safe to run again. So he went back to Paris. Same scheme, same forged papers, a fresh set of scrap dealers. He picked his mark and started closing the deal all over again. But this time, his target got suspicious before the money changed hands and went to the police. Lustig slipped away before they could grab him. But now his luck in Paris was done. He fled to America. And in America, his legend only grew. In one famous episode, Lustig conned the most dangerous man in the country, Al Capone, persuading the mob boss to hand over $50,000 for an investment. Lustig simply put the money in a safe deposit box, did nothing with it, and 2 months later returned every dollar, claiming the deal had fallen through. Capone was so stunned by this apparently honest criminal that he pressed a few $1,000s on Lustig as a reward, which was the entire plan. Lustig never wanted Capone's investment. He wanted Capone's trust. But every con man eventually runs the one con too many. For Lustig, it was counterfeiting. He'd been flooding America with fake bills, over $2 million of them. In 1935, the authorities finally caught him. The night before his trial, he knotted his bedsheets into a rope, climbed out a window, and escaped because of course he did. They recaptured him a month later. His reported greeting to the officers, "Well, boys, here I am." This time there was no talking his way out. He was sentenced to 20 years and sent to Alcatraz. A Secret Service agent reportedly told him, "Count, you're the smoothest con man that ever lived." Lustig died there in 1947, a forgotten prisoner, his death barely noticed. So why does the story of a charming crook still matter? Because Victor Lustig didn't succeed by being a genius. He succeeded by understanding people. And here's the uncomfortable part. Every one of his cons worked by handing the victim a story they wanted to believe. Poisson didn't hand over a fortune because he was stupid. He was a smart, ambitious man, and that ambition was the exact hook. He wanted to be an insider so badly that when Lustig offered him that feeling, his desire did the con's work for it. That's the real lesson, and it hasn't aged a day. Con artists don't break through your intelligence. They go around it straight to what you want to be true. The bribe worked because it flattered. The secrecy worked because it made him feel chosen. Every red flag got reinterpreted as proof because Poisson was rooting for the story. The smartest people aren't immune to this. Sometimes they're more vulnerable because they trust their own judgment enough to argue themselves past the warning signs. Victor Lustig understood that 100 years ago. He never sold the Eiffel Tower, not really. He sold people the version of themselves they most wanted to be.